happens to child peas in prison? I think I have a pretty good idea. But if I had any advice for y'all, don't drop that motherfucking soap. Alright? Let's get right into the video, man. Love y'all. Appreciate y'all. Where you at, family? Hit that like button on your way in. Come on, let's do it.
Where you at, Berto?
It's the 2nd of February 1980. We're in the New Mexico State Penitentiary, and it's chaos. Hours before, due to unheeded warnings and poor safety standards, a group of violent inmates first escaped their cells, and then their unit. Soon, they would have control of the entire prison and several hostages. They had access to weapons from the prison armory, drugs from the pharmacy, and tools from the workshop. We're talking full law and order breakdown. The prison was quickly surrounded by law enforcement, and eventually the riot would be brought under control. But not before some of the most gruesome and violent acts perhaps ever performed on Earth were first carried out. Inside the prison was Cell Block 4, the protected wing. It mainly housed those that needed separation from general population, informants, the mentally ill, and most importantly for this video, offenders. The inmates inside the block were still locked in their cells, and they watched in horror as rioting inmates used acetylene torches over several hours to simply cut their way inside. Some inmates tried to break out of their cells, some tried to alert law enforcement outside, some tried to block the doors or even tie them closed to stop the intruders, but it was too late. One by one, individuals were dragged out of their cells, were brutally tortured, and then killed. One inmate was said to have had a blowtorch placed inside his eyes and mouth, causing his head to explode. The New Mexico State Penitentiary is permanently closed today, but there still remains a burned-in stain on the concrete from this moment, all those years later. The inmates had been looking for the snitches and sex offenders, a subset of prisoner considered to be at the very bottom of the totem pole of prison society. This might be the worst.
You know you're disgusting as a human being when everybody in jail, like literally murderers, killers, the worst people on planet Earth, even to that demographic, you are the scum of the world. Like, come on, bro. Peas honestly belong under the jail. They might actually be the only group of people that we need to just go ahead and bring back stoning for, bro. We need to have them walking through the streets while everybody's pointing and throwing stones at them. I hope that ain't too much for YouTube, but we talking about peas here, man. What are we doing?
Case scenario for a sex offender in prison, but plenty of brutal violence is carried out against them inside prisons all over the world. And it brings a few questions to the forefront of our minds. What is life really like for sex offenders and child abusers in prison? Why is violence so common against them? And what do those offenders and the prisons do to mitigate it? It's time to find out how the scum of the earth stay alive, and sometimes how they don't.
Let's do it.
So, when a sex offender is first sent to prison, what can they expect? Truthfully, it all depends on which prison they might be sent to, as well as what security classification it has, even the country itself. For the purposes of this video, we're just going to use the UK, USA, and traditional Western examples. Although for what it's worth, a person in this situation will likely struggle everywhere. Whether you agree or not, sex offenders today are typically sentenced to serve their time in lower security prisons, although particularly violent cases will often move them swiftly up the ladder. Some prisons today are even specifically designed to deal with offenders from the get-go, but we'll get to that later. Lower security prisons often house a larger number of offenders, so they're somewhat safer for the average deviant than at higher security levels. Low security is for the lower risk inmates, people who are inside for more petty crimes or coming off the back of a long sentence at a more secure facility. Simply put, it's not as common for a sex offender to get attacked in that environment because most inmates are just trying to do their time and regain their freedom. Brutalizing a sex offender just isn't worth that. That doesn't mean it never happens.
It's one of them. You got to go to one of them jails where it's like, I'm in here for life. I've already settled into this life. I'm never seeing daylight again. Come on, I'm ready to risk it all. What you gonna add another 10-year life sentence to my 10-year life sentence? Yeah, watch out.
And not all lower security prisons are the same, but the risk is certainly lower in general. It's at the higher security facilities where the trouble for sex offenders really ramps up. For starters, it's pretty much impossible for a sex offender to hide their crimes inside prison itself. Whether it's the old "what are you in for" question, handing someone their papers, having their story checked by outsiders, or a loose-lipped guard, inmates will eventually find out that their fellow inmate is, to put it mildly, no good. From here, we need to learn a little bit about the prison hierarchy, just so that we understand what no good really implies. In a lot of prisons, the social hierarchy is based on what kind of criminal you are. At the top tends to be those who are career criminals who've committed violent offences. Mobsters, armed robbers, that sort of level. As you head further down the hierarchy, you find white-collar criminals, as well as those who are guilty of lesser or non-violent crimes. Thefts, drug offences, that kind of thing. Every criminal has a place on the ladder, and if you zoom down right to the bottom of it, you get into the untouchable tier, where inmates finding out about an individual's conviction is going to make their life in prison much, much worse. Right down here, their place often focuses around the vulnerability of their victims. Sex offenders are of course present. Almost everyone in prison has a someone they care about who may have found themselves targeted at some point, and so predators are likely to draw ire. And child sex offenders are pretty much the lowest of the low for this reason.
That's crazy, but it makes sense, bro. It makes sense. Like, it's one thing to be a it's like, literally, if we think about it, it's one thing to be a murderous, terrible person. It's another to literally prey on the helpless that cannot defend themselves. Like, you genuinely are, like, you are down to your DNA.
Beyond being an obvious societal taboo, children are seen as innocent and uncorrupted. Most people will agree that any person who takes that away is a scumbag. And despite the fact that criminals in prison would have put innocent people through similarly traumatic events, you won't be surprised to know that they feel largely the same about crimes towards children. Following that line of inquiry, others who exist in this kind of tier include those found guilty of elder, or those found guilty of harming other vulnerable people like the disabled. The only other criminals who can find themselves this low within prison's social hierarchy are snitches. As the saying goes, they of course get...
They look... They looking at you snitching the same as peas? That's kind of crazy, I can't count.
Stitches. But largely, yes, sex offenders and child tend to make up the majority of these untouchable inmates. Of course, though, they're not untouchable, are they? Far from it. Now, you might be led to assume that being a child offender in prison is an instant death sentence, and in some places you might be right, but not everywhere. The key thing about finding out a person has one of these
I'm telling you, it shouldn't even be a death sentence. It should be stoning, daily stoning until you go out. I'm telling you, bro. That's how they need to handle that. Every day you wake up and you get stoned, and then one day you just gonna fall to your knees because you can't take it no more, and God decides to pull your card.
Good crimes on their record is that they instantly fall to the bottom of that social hierarchy.
Bro, I really hope YouTube don't cook me for saying that. But you gotta understand, again, if YouTube cook me for saying that, we need to check the Google files. We need to check YouTube files. Why you defending peas? Come on now. I just gotta get that out there, bro. Disclaimer, it's all hypothetical on GTA. I ain't saying nobody should get stoned in GTA.
Which makes them an easy target. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is going to stick their neck out to help a convicted offender, least of all because doing so might be seen by others as tolerance towards them. In any case, we'll start with the violence because it's the most visible and visceral example of what can happen to these kind of inmates once they're locked up. Yes, it's true that offenders can be, and sometimes are, targeted in brutal attacks. Some can be attacked pretty much on site, if particular details of their case ever found their way into certain inmates' hands. These guys are often driven off the yard and into protective custody. Some prison yards simply don't tolerate having those kinds of prisoners out and about, and the inmates enforce that policy through violence. Sometimes, gangs who check the paperwork of inmates when they enter a prison will then put pressure on their new cellmates to do something about them, or otherwise risk looking like they condone the crimes. And when it comes to prison, a lot of assaults are more than your average beatdown. A hard object, like a padlock or a rock in a sock, can make a devastating blunt force weapon. Meanwhile, shivs, clubs and shanks can be made out of almost anything. Heavy objects can be dropped onto inmates from a height, they can be beaten down in camera blind spots, or have disgusting liquids thrown over them. Particularly popular in some facilities is the use of, quote, prison napalm. This delightful concoction starts with water, which is boiled either with sugar or a candy bar in it, and then thrown over the target. The sticky contents means it clings to the skin, whilst causing severe burns all over the body. And of course, if all else fails, anything within a cell can be turned into a weapon by bashing a person's head into it. Why an inmate would be attacked might seem obvious, but clearly a universal disdain towards this kind of person doesn't equate to instant violence in...
Imagine going out to your head just being bashed into the toilet. Like, holy...
every prison. So what causes someone to go after an offender in this way? Of course, as we mentioned, it could be to get them off the yard. If the guards see that a person is being targeted, they will remove someone from the unit so as not to cause more violence in general. So, attacking someone could be a way to get in with a prison gang. It could also be a form of kind of rough justice for the crimes. In general, prison sentences for offenders aren't often seen as sufficient due to short sentencing guidelines. So by attacking the offender in prison, you're kind of making up for where the justice system was perceived to have failed. It could also be someone bragging about what they've done, or it could simply be someone trying to gain notoriety. Margaret Buck, a spokeswoman for the California Department of Corrections, stated as such after the killing of notorious pedophile and former Catholic priest John Gergen, quoting here, "If you take out a offender like this former priest in Massachusetts, maybe the person who took him out thought he'd make a name for himself." Gergen's killer, a man named Joseph Druce, stated that he looked upon Gergen as a prize and plotted his murder for a month beforehand. In many ways, attacking a notorious offender like this is seen by inmates as a victimless crime. After all, who cares if the ex-offender gets killed? Especially for those who are never getting out and have nothing left to lose. They may see killing a serial offender as a net good for the world, and their actions as an example of kind of taking one for the team. At the same time, they gain status and a sense of moral superiority, and the taxpayer doesn't have to pay for their incarceration anymore. You could make the argument that everybody wins, and lots of people do make that point. There is still the offender, who of course has lost big time, as well as his or her family, who likely still care about them, but many will feel that...
Man, there's pretty much like your kids can do some, like, family, like your loved ones could do some crazy things and you still love them. But you fondle children, bro, I don't want nothing to do with you. You disown. Take my last name away, nigga. You ain't one of us.
This doesn't really matter. All of that, of course, is on top of all the other random violence that could be caused by something else entirely. Taking someone's stuff, accumulating debts, disrespecting a gang member, or someone suffering with mental health problems, snapping in a violent manner. The guards don't help in a lot of prisons in this respect. They're people too, and might have a similar sentiment to wanting to see such offenders brutalised for what they've done. Some guards might leave doors open, or look the other way whilst a brazen attack is carried out, allowing for them to plead ignorance and plausible deniability, and writing off such actions as simple accidental mistakes. Some might be, many are not. Regardless, even with the guards sometimes rooting against them, there isn't much sympathy for those on this rung of the ladder whenever bad things happen to them. For example, Richard Huckle was considered one of Britain's most prolific child sex offenders. He was just 3 years
it fucking looks like it.
into a life sentence when he was stabbed and killed by another inmate.
One of Britain's worst
has been stabbed to death in prison. Richard Huckle, who was from Kent, has been jailed for abusing up to 200 children overseas. He was found dead in his cell at HMP Full Sutton in Yorkshire yesterday. Our Home Affairs correspondent Sarah Corker reports.
He had spent 9 years abusing children and babies in both Malaysia and Cambodia, pleading guilty to no less than 71 offences. More examples would be the likes of John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Jard Fogel. All
Jeffrey Dahmer fondled children? I thought he just, I literally feel crazy because I was about to say, I thought he just ate black people. Like, that sounds crazy. Oh, he didn't fondle children. I didn't know he fondled children. I thought he just, bro. Yo, the world is scary, dude. That there's people even like this out there. Oh my God.
who were attacked. Dahmer was
Sorry, I said the Lord's name in vain. Oh my gosh.
even killed when he was attacked in 1994. All of their crimes included those committed against young people, and Dahmer's in particular were wrapped in his twisted motivations. Gacy wasn't much better, whilst Fogel had
Really?
status as a
I didn't know
celebrity
that.
prior to his crimes being revealed. But the thing is, a violent beating, or being threatened, is pretty par for the course in a lot of prisons. Eventually, someone will either be beaten off the yard or they'll check themselves in for protection. But there are much worse fates for the average offender than just getting beaten up. Of course, getting killed is possible, but it's often rarer than other darker outcomes. One more common result is coercion or extortion. Offender in prison may buy his protection through providing the right people with items from the prison commissary. Some inmates might even be able to arrange money to be wired to an individual's account or to their families. If the offender is famous or otherwise known to be wealthy, this can continue in perpetuity, where the offender becomes little more than a piggy bank, doling out money under the threat of violence if they didn't. Coercion, however, doesn't have to be just financial in nature. Offender could be used to complete various labour tasks and jobs for protection, basically like a slave who is paid by not getting hit in the face. They might be pushed into other crimes within the prison, like helping with smuggling operations or hiding contraband in their cells. They could also be used to pass notes, drugs, or weapons between areas of the prison, or even act as lookouts, really anything that the exploiting party wants. The only consistent factor being the protection of the individual from wider harm, just at a cost. And that cost can be even greater still, as some offenders are extorted and forced into performing acts on other prisoners for a form of protection. Of course,
My God.
some inmates deliberately and violently target offender inmates in this way as well, as if to dole out a sense of vigilante justice to put them through what they themselves had done to others. There is always the option of becoming a prison wife for protection. It is
Prison wife. Oh my gosh, we don't watch videos like this before, y'all. This is crazy. Turn a hoe into a hoe.
a truly miserable existence founded in pain, fear, violence, and control. But for some, even this hell is preferable to the alternative, which is widespread ostracization and isolation from the rest of the prison population. If someone is beaten off the yard, they are put in protective custody, which is a double-edged sword. An individual will be somewhat safer there, but it comes at the cost of a staggering amount of human interaction. Humans are social beings. We're designed to want to converse and mix with others. And even in prison, that feeling is still there. But many units don't permit offenders such a luxury. Many inmates want nothing to do with those who are considered even greater scumbags than them, and the result is a social pariah status. They experience something akin to total identity collapse after being rejected by everything and
Good. Yeah, nigga, man. We ain't worried about you. Lose it all.
everyone. They simply become their crime and nothing more, in a way
That's all you is. You ain't nothing.
that not many other prisoners experience. It's, as you can imagine, isolating and lonely. Some might see being left alone as the ultimate win within prison, but it doesn't quite work that way. Even in protective custody, people are subject to the risks of everyday prison life, and offenders face the added cost of spending potentially years of it without significant social interaction. It leads to a quiet, monotonous existence.
I ain't gonna lie though, on some real shit. I'm going to continue to follow the law. I'm going to continue to be a law-abiding citizen. Because just like the whole concept of jail, bro, just think about how blessed we are in the free world. You wake up, eat some food, move fast, move slow, however your morning's going, you know what I'm saying? You get to go to the gym. You get to have an idea and act on it. You get to go spend some money. You get to go, go to your job every day, put in some work. Like, you get to hang out with your friends, laugh. You get to watch TV whenever you want. You get to do whatever the fuck you want in your life. The idea of being in a cell and I can't do and I gotta where I sleep, like literally, and I gotta sleep where my cellmate as well. Like, bro, and anything over, like if you did a petty crime and you end up in jail for like a couple of days, even that sounds like absolute torture. You talking about years of my life, bro. Then we've had this debate before on the channel. It's because of my personal preference and how much I enjoy and value my freedom. I almost feel like the death sentence is a easier fate than carrying out a lifelong sentence. You know what I'm saying? We've had this debate. I'm curious to hear what y'all think, because I almost feel like it is easier to just be put out of my misery rather than just live every day in a world that I have zero control, I have zero choice. I'm just just existing in a box. It sounds like actual torture, bro. But I don't even know what y'all think. I'm actually curious to read the comments on this one.
Free from the vanishingly few perks that exist inside, only punctured by moments of extreme fear and violence. Isolation in prison is associated with a variety of mental health issues and unhealthy behaviours. Again, there's no real sympathy or love for those in that position, but it just goes to show how much harder it can be for those who commit the darkest crimes. So then, what can an inmate do to mitigate their status inside prison? What few strategies offenders use to make life more bearable on the inside? Well, it's a mix. As we mentioned, they can always check in to protective custody, as known as solitary confinement, or the special housing unit. Some make this choice and others have it made for them. The isolation, of course, offers some protection, but as we said, it comes at the cost of the individual's mental health. Some have no issues being isolated like this because they understand the alternative or just seem to manage better in their own company. But there are, of course, risks, both physical,
I guess it ain't gonna be that bad if you like a schizophrenic ass nigga,
and psychological regardless. Another option is gang protection. Again, many prison gangs, especially in the US, are based around race, and even amongst the lowest of the low, there is some level of protection, at least from other gangs. Offenders in that environment will only be targeted if their gang's shot caller gives the okay. It's certainly possible for a person to be attacked despite this, but in general it does slim down the chances of a random act of brutal violence. Another option is for those individuals to band together, as strength in numbers can put off single attackers. It also helps with the isolation, as offenders then find a group with each other. Depending on the prison, some yards have a large number of offenders, and so the prison culture begrudgingly accepts them, resulting in the violence towards them becoming less widespread. A more drastic solution from the prison management side is to create whole wings mostly dedicated to offenders. When these offenders aren't just a minority, but a plurality or even a majority of inmates, violence towards them obviously decreases. With the amount that these guys check themselves in or have to isolate themselves, it makes sense then to just give them their own wing. There's a real tension here though between...
The problem is the fact that this even has to be considered. Like, why is there so many of these weirdos, bros? Sick.
Weirdo!
Between them and the non-offender prisoners who then have to exist in their wing might be afraid of being lumped in with the real offenders. Having such units within prisons makes them a target, like in the New Mexico riot that we mentioned in the intro, and there's no limit to the creativity of cruelty that some may try to inflict on them. Often, guards or upper prison management has to threaten strict crackdowns and increased times on sentences to get many to fall in line. Of course, though this has little effect on those who believe they've got nothing left to lose, like lifers. What else? Well, if this kind of offender is really lucky, they might even be sent to an entire prison dedicated to offenders. These are called SOMPs, or offender management programs. Now, these programs can take place in any prison where there are lots of offenders, but increasingly the thought has been to have dedicated institutions for such offenders altogether to entirely eliminate the risk of reprisal-based violence. They help create a more secure environment for offenders, which reduces the need for protective custody or special housing units in regular prisons, which makes space for more violent inmates. Such institutions aren't overly new, they're just not all that common. Take HMP Wotton, for example, in the British city of Nottingham. It was built in the 60s, but the prison has been dedicated to offender management since the early 1990s.
Wow.
Wotton holds roughly 800 inmates, and all of them are offenders. 70%.
What? Hey, man, throw that whole prison away, bro. I feel like, again, you already hearing my takes throughout this video. There shouldn't be no pandering to these, bro. Why are we paying taxes and they over here making dedicated prisons for these guys? Man, watch them go outside.
Percent of those who are incarcerated here have committed offences against children. The prison's local nickname is the Pedo Palace. But of course, they too come with their own downsides. They're not popular, as you can tell by HMP Wotton's nickname, and so there's not a lot of political will to protect what most in society see as the lowest of the low. So, whilst such programs appear to work, nobody...
Man, who was in office when them got built? We need to check their hard drives. What? Come on now.
Exactly gagging to build a offender prison in their local area, for obvious reasons. In general, these prisons are believed to help offenders prepare for life back on the outside. Whether you agree or don't, sentencing guidelines don't mandate an immediate life sentence for offenders in most places, which means they will be released back into society at some point. And even if you have no sympathy for them, it's better for those capable of committing such crimes to not be violently institutionalized, and instead for them to at least try and be rehabilitated, as the other option leads to patterns of reoffending, which only punishes society and creates more victims.
I guess. Or we could just do what I said. I think what I said works.
Makes sense, then, for the betterment of the public safety for such institutions to exist. But remember, most prisons aren't like this. Most offenders in prison live an isolated, violent, and miserable life. And even though many weren't sentenced to life, they end up never leaving. Some will call it a mercy, others a net positive on the world, and some will just call it the natural order of things. One thing is for certain, though. Even at the bottom of the ladder, it shows there is always further a person can fall.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout.
Y'all let me know what y'all think about that one in the comment section. W video, definitely some different insight, but hey, we know we not feeling bad for none of that over here. Love y'all, appreciate y'all. Where you at, family?
Where you at, Berto?
My name's Berto, and make sure you guys check out the next vidski right here. We watching, we binging, we where you at? Where you at? I need to see you, man.